G'day everyone. It's been a while since my last talking video. It's mostly been in-car footage from racing throughout the year. It's been pretty busy, but we've come to the end of the racing year. It's now the start of 2026. And I wanted to take some time to go through changes on the car, go through what we achieved last year, and talk about what I'm going to do this year with it. So first up, let's talk about changes. You'll probably notice the car looks a bit different to what it did when I finished the build year 18 months ago. So there's a few things that I'll talk to. First, try to take out a bit of weight. I've gone to a carbon fibre bonnet and carbon fibre hatch and a Lexan rear window. They're just pretty cheap ones from China. They are basically fiberglass with a layer of carbon on top, so they're not super light, but they probably save me 5 or 10 kg between them. And that offsets some of the aero, which we'll talk about later. The second thing and most obvious is the wheels. So gone are the red wheels. Now I've got some nice white inky PF06s. The reason I changed wheels is one, because they look cool, but two, I needed to go to a 16 on the rear, and that was to allow me to change to slick tyres. So I'm running Hankook F200 slicks. They're pretty dirty at the moment. And those are a 17-inch in the front. There are a 240, 610, 17, and a 16 in the rear, so a 210, 610, 16. Bit wider than the name suggests. They're pretty similar in width to the 255 R-comps that I had on it beforehand. But the reason I went with these slicks is they're shorter. So the second number in those specs is 610 millimeters. That's the height of the tyre. That's quite a lot shorter than a normal 17-inch sort of semi-slick. So the previous tyres I had on it were 255 40-17s. Those are 637, 640 millimeters in diameter. And these slicks are both 610 millimeters in diameter. So what that helps with is getting the car lower to the ground and bringing the diameter of the tyre back to what the car is designed to run from factory. So on my old tyres, the 255 40-17s, I had to run the car really high, like it was about 140 millimeters under the side skirt and about 140 millimeters under the front lip. That's just under 5 inches, just under 6 inches. In order to have enough clearance for the front suspension travel and enough steering lock to get me around the circuits. So moving to that 610 millimeter tyre, the shorter tyre, I've actually lowered the car like 40 millimeters. It's a big difference. So part of that came from the tyre being smaller itself. So the car is 15 millimeters lower to the ground just from the tyre being smaller. But I was also able to lower the front suspension and rear suspension and still maintain enough travel and enough steering clearance to make the car work at a much lower ride height. That's for two reasons. One, because it looks cool. It definitely sort of makes it look more like a normal Honda. But two, it's so I could run Aerodynamics, which is the next changes that we'll talk to. So with the slicks, they did bring an improvement in times. They were a step up in grip over the Advan AO50s that I was running previously. So pretty successful, but they're a lot more tricky to manage as a tyre. So these slicks are designed for like circuit racing. So they take quite a while to warm up, even though I've got softs on the rear and mediums on the front. It's a good sort of 2 or 3 laps before they're properly up to temperature. And a lot of the races that I do are sprints, so you only get 3 or 4 laps at a time. So it makes it kind of hard. It puts all the pressure on the last lap or two of each sprint session to put down a time. They also heat cycle out really quickly. So the slicks are super fast when they're new and in their first few heat cycles. So as they're designed for circuit racing, that makes sense because you're only ever going to do 1 or 2 heat cycles on them because the races are quite long and you'll wear them out. But with sprints, I'd probably put 10 or 15 heat cycles on them in a single weekend, and that would essentially ruin that whole set of tyres, whole $2,000 set of tyres, just in 1 weekend of racing. They'd still have plenty of tread left on them, but they'll be a second slower than what they were when they're new. And that's a pretty big gap. in comparison, the old AO50s, they are a super consistent tyre. So AO50s, like every tyre, are fastest when they're brand new, but they don't degrade much across the heat cycles. I'm always setting PBs or matching times after I've done like 50 plus heat cycles on them and they've got 0 tread left. AO50s are really good like that, and they've spoiled me with how good they are in that respect. So it was quite an adjustment moving to the slicks and having to sort of manage tyre life to make sure that the events that I needed to do well at, I was able to have fresh tyres and set good times without having to buy a new set of tyres every time, because I can't afford to do that. So yeah, I think the car looks really cool as it is. I really like the white wheels on the black. It's a giant pain in the ass to clean. I have to essentially clean all the brake dust off the wheels every single time I use the car, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Next up is aero. So like I said, the reason I moved to a shorter tyre is so I could lower the car and run aero. I could run aero at the height that I had, but the front splitter would be too far off the ground and it'd be not very efficient. So now that the car is lowered, I built a front splitter, and I'll talk about that more in detail when I get the car on jack stands and show you how it works. I had a lot of issues getting that to work properly, and went through a couple of rear wings. So at the moment, at the rear, got a gigantic APR, I think it's a GT500 wing. I've borrowed this off my friend Robin. He found it on Facebook Marketplace for a great deal. It's quite an expensive wing to buy new. We don't know if it's real. We assume it is because it actually looks like pretty good quality. But yeah, the thing's huge. Like the cord length is like 300 mil long. So yeah, big carbon fibre rear wing, and that's needed to balance out the front splitter. So I built the splitter out of plywood. It's essentially an inch thick because I did half-inch plywood or 12 millimeters, and then doubled up that thickness in a number of places so I could get a nice clean radius going under the splitter, which I'll show you when I jack the car up. And I also wanted to make it quick release so I could take it on and off the car without having to jack it up and take the wheels off. That mostly worked. I had a lot of issues with the splitter flapping at the front before I added those cable stays. And I'll insert a video of me doing some testing throughout the year and showing you how bad that was. Even with aluminium reinforcement tubes running across the splitter, yeah, it still broke and it still flapped around a lot until I put those cable stays in. I just don't really like the look of cable stays. That's why I tried to get rid of it originally. So the splitter also has tunnels in it, which yeah, we'll jack up the car now and I can show you those tunnels, which we 3D printed, and I'll show you the quick release mechanism for getting it on and off the car. Okay, so I've jacked the car up and removed most of the splitter fixings, so I'll pull it off in a second, but I'll just give you a bit of a closer look. So at the front, we just have these cable stays. I've unhooked these at the moment. These are balustrating wires and fittings just from Bunnings, the hardware store. I also have similar stays in each corner, which connect up into a little ring on the chassis there. And they were all added after testing because I kept having issues with the splitter flapping around. So underneath at the rear, I've bolted a metal bracket to the subframe, which you can see, and then there's a little rod attached to the back of the splitter, which slides into that, so it's pretty easy. And then at the front, it's pretty hard to see at the moment, but I've got some little some plates coming down from the tow hook locations on the chassis rails, and they have a quick release on them, and then they snap into the receiver on the splitter itself. We'll be able to see those in more detail when I take the splitter off. Can also see the 3D printed tunnels that I've put in there. I had to make them in 2 pieces. I was borrowing my friend's Bamboo X1C. I've now got a Bamboo H2S, so I can actually print those in full size. So I'll be replacing those with a single piece unit at some point. Alright, so I've already popped off the other side's quick release, so I just need to click this one, and then we can pull the splitter off, and I'll show you how easy that is. So that's now all free, and all I have to do, I have lots of wood I need to catch it, is just done. So normally I'll put that on like a little moving dolly, so I can just wheel it out the way. But yeah, super easy. I can actually get that on and off when the car is on the ground with the wheels on. I have tested it, so it's a pretty cool setup. I'm pretty happy with it. But yeah, I'll put the splitter up on some trestles and we'll have a closer look. Just before we look at the splitter on the trestles, this is a more closer look at the chassis mounts. So I've made these plates here. The pin and the splitter can sort of be put on this and then slide along back in. And then basically it just clips in here, and that's a quick release latch. To pop that latch, just pull the little lever up the top, and then the splitter pops off. That's attached up on the toe point, factory toe point locations. Super strong location. I just had these laser cut out of 4mm steel. Really strong and simple solution. These are the same sort of latches that Professional Awesome use in their quick release splitters. I just found out what they are. They're called rotary latches, and ordered those off eBay for pretty cheap. And here's the splitter itself. So as I said, it's kind of 1.5 or 2 layers of 12mm plywood. So you can see the upper layer here, the lower layer here, and then also I've routed out clearance for the oil pan, because the oil pan sits super low on these cars. The reason I went with that sort of second half upper layer is 1, to add strength, but 2, to enable me to do a really nice radius underneath. It's probably quite hard to see, but it's quite a gradual radius backwards. Help accelerate the air underneath the splitter and make it a lot more efficient. And that's also helped by the 3D printed tunnels that I showed you before. So these are screwed in. I've just covered up the screws with some tape to stop rocks getting stuck in there. They're not huge, but I think they do a pretty decent job. Basically, I used a bunch of rules of thumb from the High Performance Academy Aerodynamics course on front splitters from Kyle Engineers, Kyle Forster. Basically just followed all those rules of thumb, and that's about the largest size that I could come up with to fit in my car and not have too much overlap with the tyre. Also added this little lip. That's just some eBay garden edging, so that just interfaces with the front lip on the car, seals it all up. These are the rods that go into the bracket on the chassis at the rear. Again, just cut bit of steel, welded onto a bit of round bar, and these little bolts. If we look underneath, they're super flat. They're called elevator bolts. They're used for like conveyor belts and that sort of thing, so elevator, like a grain elevator. They're super handy. So basically they have little teeth on the upside of these flat bits which dig into the wood, and then you just feed them through, put a nut on, and yeah, super nice flush way of doing it. These are the front receivers, so I gave it a bit of tolerance to sort of, the bracket on the car comes in like this. I just gave it a bit of a angle to sort of help guide that through, and then I've got a shoulder bolt in here, which is the exact right size. I've ground it down a tiny bit, the exact size to clip into those rotary latches on the brackets on the car. Again, they're held on by the elevator bolts. So like I showed you on the clip earlier, I had a lot of issues with the splitter flapping around when I was first testing it. That's because there's such a large distance between these front mounts and the front lip of the splitter, where there's quite a lot of pressure on. The plywood was just not strong enough. So I added this big aluminium tube crossbar and these aluminium channels sort of running forwards to back. Tried that still didn't work. So the video I had earlier is actually with this exact setup in there. but it had snapped the aluminium here. So after that, I gave in and went for those cable stays, which bolt into here, which has probably made all this stuff redundant now, but it's still on there. But yeah, the cable stays made it super, super stiff. It's a pretty heavy beast, probably weighs like 20 kgs. So one of the things I'll be doing next year, which I'll talk about later, is remaking this in a bit more lightweight fashion, but super effective splitter. So one of the other things I did, you might be able to see up in there, I have damper position sensors front and rear on all four corners. I did that primarily so I could actually track the aero balance of the car and track how much downforce it was making. I did some sort of tests at my local track where I'd accelerate up to 150 k's, then just clutch in and let it coast for a while. And as it sort of coasted from 150 and naturally slowed down to 120 or whatever, I could look at the suspension positions at each of those speeds, and then you can back calculate how much downforce it's creating based on the spring rates of the car and the motion ratio and so on. So I made a little spreadsheet that did that. In total, at 200 kilometers an hour, the splitter was making roughly 200 kilograms of downforce, which is quite a lot. And that's also why I needed to go to that big APR rear wing to balance it out. The wing doesn't add that much. I think it's at the same speed, 70 or 80 kgs of downforce in the particular configuration that I have it set up as. And for the weight balance of the car, that seemed to work pretty well. It wasn't a particularly oversteery car. I managed to get it pretty dialed in over time. So yeah, so they were the main focuses for this year is get the suspension lowered and in a better window geometry wise, and then enabling me to run the aero. So next up, we'll talk about some events. So 2025 was a pretty big year for racing. I think I did 19 days at the track, including testing and events, which is quite a lot. I'm pretty tired after that. But a really successful year, really happy with what I managed to do. So the car competes here in Western Australia, we have the WA Speed Event Series, which is like a sprint series. So you do circuit sprints. There's some rounds that are hill climbs and things like that. I compete in the open under 2 litre class. So I'm just running a K20 as a bit of a reminder. So K20 Z1 out of a DC5 Type S, E85 cams, intake manifold, headers, just the basics. And that's making about 230 horsepower at the wheels on a hub dyno. And that has a close ratio 6-speed gearbox with a BYP Gearset, and all the race car stuff inside, roll cage seats. You've seen it all before. So for the Speed Event Series, we went really well. I managed to get to probably 2/3 of all the rounds. There's quite a few that are far away travelling, which I wasn't able to get to, but that's all right. So in the under 2 litre class, I managed to get second place behind my friend Braden. He's got an EG Civic with a K20. He managed to go to all the rounds, so he got tons of points from doing that. And then when we were both at the same rounds, I managed to beat him most of the time. He beat me a couple times, so really good competitive racing, and he deservedly took out the trophy. And then the overall series. So the Speed Event Series is kind of split into two things, a series and a cup. The cup is for cars like this, and that covers all the rounds. I think I managed to actually get second place in that as well, behind Braden, the same guy, my friend, who won the whole series, won the whole cup. So that was a cool achievement. But the one I'm most proud of is the series. So the Speed Event Series also allows single-seater cars. So, radicals, cross carts, like proper hill climb single-seater race cars. But they can only do some of the rounds, about 80% of them. So the overall series is from those rounds that everyone can get to, and I managed to get second place for that too. So that's second place against, like I said, radicals, like turbo Hayabusa powered formula cars, all sorts of real crazy stuff, big horsepower time attack cars. So to get second place in the overall series in a little 2-litre naturally aspirated thing, I'm really, really happy with. The winner for the year was Dave Baxter in a radical. He was also super consistent, super fast. But yeah, really fun year and super happy with what I managed to achieve there. Also, on top of that racing, I did a lot of testing and development. So there's probably easily 6 or 8 track days just trying to dial in the aero, like I was talking about before. Had a lot of issues with the splitter flapping around, so it took a while to get on top of that. And then once that's done, you've got to then dial the balance in, get the rear wing working properly, get the suspension set up working properly. That testing was a bit difficult sometimes. A few of the days were rained out, which made it harder to test on the slicks. So I had to go back to wets and go much slower. I never got as many laps as I thought I was going to get, so I just didn't feel like I was making the progress I needed to. But towards the end of it, started making good leaps and bounds. The suspension, I run Shockworks Coilovers. Shockworks is an Australian company and they do an awesome job of doing custom race suspension that's quite affordable. They revalved the front and rear shocks to suit the slicks and the aero, and that's made a big difference. That really got the car dialed in, ready to go. Because the reason for all that testing and the reason for all these changes was I wanted to go across and compete in Honda Nationals. So Australia's pretty big. It's about the same physical size as America, despite there being far less people living there. And I'm on the western side, so in Perth in Western Australia. And it's about a 4-day drive to get across and compete in the Eastern States events. But I've wanted to do it for a few years, so I took a couple of weeks off work, hooked up the race car, put all my camper gear in the back of my tow vehicle, and drove for 4 days to get across to Winton in Victoria. And first did a test day and then competed at Honda Nationals the next day, and that was awesome fun. So I'd been a couple times as a spectator and helping out friends who had entered. And yeah, great event, great people. There's a lot of people that I'm friends with online through Instagram. It's great to catch up with them and see them in person and see their cars and compete against them. So I went over with pretty high hopes. I thought I was going to be pretty well near the top of the naturally aspirated cars, and that's pretty well where we ended up. So really happy with where we came. Like I said before, it's just a K20 car. It's quite down on power to some of the K24s. So I think I ended up 4th in the naturally aspirated class and 7th overall, which is an awesome achievement. So for Winton, I did a 1:32.0, I think my fastest time was. Plenty left in the car. A lot of that's down to me. I've never driven Winton before, so there's a lot of learning and there's some pretty difficult corners corners you need a lot of balls for at Winton. But such a cool experience. So yeah, great competing with everybody. Just a really good time. Nice to sort of, even the long drive, 4 days each way, was really relaxing. Just putting on podcasts and playing some music and camping out under the stars. Just all around a good time. So that was probably the highlight of the year, closely followed by the second place in the speed event series. I'd love to go back to Honda Nationals at some point. Won't be this year. It's quite a lot of effort and money to do that, but maybe in 2027 we'll look at doing that. So when I built this car as an under 2 litre naturally aspirated, my goals were to basically be the fastest under 2 litre car in WA. I've achieved that at Collie Motorplex. I've done a 115.2 around the long track and a 48.4 or something around the short track. That long track time is by far the fastest under 2 litre car that's been there. So really happy with that. That's a very quick time that hangs around with most of the big turbo cars. At Wanneroo, the main track in WA, my target was a 62.4, which is the race lap record for an under 2 litre sports sedan. It's actually a BMW Super Tourer from the late 90s. I got pretty close to that, so I got a 102.8 on a couple of occasions on my test days that didn't go that well, but still got some good results. I'm confident I could have beaten the 102.4 with more development. I know everyone says that, but if I spend another 6 months chasing that, I'm sure I could get it. But I think I've come to the end of the development of the naturally aspirated side of things, and I'm keen to go a lot faster. So for 2026, I won't be racing this car pretty much at all. I might do a couple of events right at the end of the year, but I'll actually be racing the Mazda 2, which we'll talk about later on. But first for this car, so basically it's going to get a big birthday. Like I said, I did 19 events last year in 2025, did another probably 18 or 17 in 2024, so it's had a bit of a thrashing and just needs some time off to recuperate. First changes will be tyres. So like I said earlier, talking about the slicks, they're quite a pain to manage. They the speed degrades with heat cycles really quickly. They take a while to come up to temperature, and while they do have better grip overall than the AO50s I was using, they're just a bit of a pain. So I'll be going back to AO50s. I'll stay a 16 on the rear. That'll be a 225 45 16, which is the same diameter as the slicks are currently. But on the front, they don't have any wide options that are that same diameter, and that's actually why I went slicks in the first place. So the widest you can get in that smaller diameter is actually a 225 50 15 or a 225 45 16. They're roughly 235mm wide. They run quite wide, but nowhere near enough for what I'm trying to do. So I'll be back to the 255 40 17 on the front with the AO50s. But this time, because I need to maintain the suspension travel, I'll be tubbing the car. Not me personally, of course, because I'm no good at fabrication, but I'll send it off to Frankie at Not Scared. So much like the drifters do, we'll be cutting out all this sort of steel here and putting in big tubs. And that'll give heaps more clearance for suspension travel with the larger tyres. I'll try and bash this in as well. And basically just give it enough room for the bigger wheels to move up and down and to steer, while still maintaining the nice low ride height that I have at the moment. The car will be a little bit higher than it was just because the tyres are bigger diameter, so it naturally lifts it off the ground a tiny bit. But that's not too bad. The splitter at the moment is 70 millimeters off the ground, so just under 3 inches. That's really low. That's actually quite hard to get it on and off the trailer. But it is good for the aerodynamic efficiency of the splitter. So if that has to raise up sort of 5 or 8 mil, I'm pretty happy with that. That's no problem at all. At the same time, I'm going to get the guards tubbed. I'm also going to chop the front of the car off and go to like a tube frame front radiator support. There's 2 reasons for that. First reason is kind of serviceability. So what I want to do is have a radiator support and a lower radiator support that are purely bolted onto the chassis, so that when I need to remove the engine, I can just unbolt everything so the entire front of the car is clear, and then put a hydraulic trolley underneath the engine, take the weight of that under the engine mounts, and just slide the engine straight out the front of the car. That means I don't need a hoist, I don't need all sorts of bullshit with engine cranes to get the engines in and out, and it makes it also super quick to change an engine at the track. Why would you need to change an engine at the track? Well, the main plan for this year is to go supercharged. So the second reason I want to do a tube front radiator support is so I can lean everything forwards and make more room for an intercooler, but also make room for a supercharger, which goes down under here. It'll be a Rotrex, a centrifugal supercharger, so it's essentially exactly the same as a turbo, but it's just driven off the crankshaft instead of driven by the exhaust gases. And that goes down pretty much just under where this alternator is at the moment. That'll have a big 5-inch intake which runs across, and that's part of the reason I need to make more space by leaning everything forwards. So with the supercharger, that necessitates getting rid of the power steering pump because the tensioner bracket goes here, and the alternator, I think, gets relocated up. So I need to go to an electric power steering pump, which I'll probably mount down over here somewhere, and that'll probably be like a Mercedes A190 pump, or maybe a Holden Astra pump, depending on what I can find. I did consider going to a fully electric column, like splicing in a Prius column or Toyota Yaris column, but from what I hear from my friends for feedback, the feel is just not as good as a hydraulic system. So I'll keep the hydraulic steering rack, but just run an electric pump for the hydraulics and run that out the way. So with the supercharger kit still in the car, I'll still stay 2 litre. I may or may not use this exact engine. I have some spares, but in the engines I'll change the rods. The pistons are quite strong. They can hold up to the power level that I'm targeting, but the rods in these are quite weak, especially as you rev them up with boost. So I'll probably replace the rods, change back to stock cams. This has some bigger Toda cams in it to bring the power band down a little bit, and hopefully end up with about 450 horsepower at the wheels at sort of 8,500 RPM, so revving the car out to maybe like 8.6, 8.8. Currently the car revs to like 9, which is pushing it for a stock oil pump, but for an NA car you need every little bit of power, whereas with a supercharger you just add another PSI boost if you really need to. So basically I'll be doubling the power of the car. That's going to be a big change. In support of that, the transmission will get some upgrades, so 3rd and 4th gear will get changed to a stronger aftermarket gear set. With these, because 3rd and 4th are in the middle of the shafts, those shafts can flex and push apart with lots more torque running through them, and then so those gears get stripped quite easy, so that's why I'll change 3 and 4. Give the gearbox a refresh and maybe some new synchros at the same time. The fuel system needs an upgrade, so this is a Bosch 044 style pump. That probably isn't enough to run 450 horsepower on E85, so I'll change that. They make a little adapter brackets for these surge tanks, which I can put in like a 525 litre Walbro or something like that. Also need to change injectors. I currently have 1000cc injectors. I probably need to go up to 1400s or 1600s or something like that. Again, with E85, it uses a lot of fuel, especially when you're making so much power. And the lift pump in the main tank at the back, I'll upgrade that to something that can support that extra flow as well. So yeah, lots of engine mods coming up. Fabrication hopefully won't take too long once I can get a slot with Frankie. That'll get that sort of in and away, and then yeah, I'll tick away here in the workshop and put together an engine that's a bit more suited to boost and get the gearbox rebuilt as well. On top of that, I'm going to remake the front splitter. So like I said before, this is basically 1 inch thick and it's really heavy, and also have all this unnecessary bracing on it now. So now that I understand what the loads are like and what holds up, what doesn't, and that I have these front cable stays, I'll move back to probably 17mm plywood. In Australia we have stuff called form ply, which is like melamine coated plywood you use for concrete formwork. So it's nice and black top and bottom, like black plastic coated. That's quite good, probably use some of that. I'll use the same sort of quick release system, front and rear, and the same cable stays. I'll also 3D print some bigger tunnels that are made out of one piece. That's actually something I'm looking to start selling because there's not very many available on eBay or elsewhere. So once I've got a good design sorted, I'll start putting those up for sale. And we'll use the same rear design as well that just interfaces with the bracket on the subframe. With the sides, something I want to do, and with this current splitter, I'm restricted to having the bottom of the side plate basically flush with the bottom of the splitter because the whole split is so low. But because I'll be going back to larger tyres and lifting the car up slightly, I can actually make an end plate. I'll 3D print one, which can stick down a bit lower. And because that sticks down lower, helps seal the air underneath the splitter and make it more efficient running through the tunnels, and hopefully get me a bit more downforce. For the rear wing, I'll probably give this wing back to my friend Robin. He can use it on his race car build. And I'll grab most likely a WingLogic MSHD aluminium extrusion wing. They seem to have gotten really good results. I've been paying close attention to Occam's Racer blog. He does aero testing in the wind tunnel with these wings and a whole bunch of on-track testing. Got a lot of great things to say about it. But personally, I just like the look of a straight wing a lot better than these kind of big bananaed curved 3D wings. So it'll sit basically in the same location, maybe a little bit higher, but nice and far back off the car. And yeah, pretty tall. It'll be about the same height as the roof, similar to this one, probably just sticking up a bit more. Electronics wise, no real changes. I don't need to change the wiring loom or the ECU or anything. But what it will change is inside the dash display. So at the moment it's not in here, but I just use an AIM Solo data logger as a dash. It's pretty basic. It can show like a couple of different measurements, you know, like coolant temperature and oil temperature. And it has a couple of, I think 3 or 4 LEDs as a shift light. Super basic. I also have this warning light on the top, so that flashes at me when something's going really wrong. So I program the ECU to tell me what's, you know, if I'm getting far over temperature or pressure drops too low. But I think I'll replace this whole setup with a Haltech IC7 dash. I run Haltech in the car, so I've got the Haltech Nexus R3, Haltech PD16, their keypad. So it makes sense to upgrade to that dash and just have a bit more functionality in terms of what I can see on the display, especially now that the car will have so much more power and it will rev so much faster. I want a shift light with a bit more granularity than just 4 LEDs. I'll still keep my AIM Solo as the data logger in the car, but I'll just upgrade to the dash display. Interior wise, no changes. Everything's working great. It's all held up to the abuse pretty well also. I have a passenger seat in at the moment because the last event I did, I was giving passenger rides. But yeah, normally that gets removed when I'm on the circuit. Yeah, no other changes needed really. There's also a few other tidy up bits and pieces. So front brakes need a bit of a refresh, so new rotors, new pads. Suspension, probably just not too much needs to be done. Probably just things like replacing some bushes. So I run sphericals around the entire car. They're holding up pretty good. The rear trailing arm bushes are starting to get a wee bit sticky, so I'll probably replace those, just PCI spherical rear trailing arm bushes. And I'll pick up some spares for front ball joints, front upper control arm ball joints, things like that. These are home development items. The shocks themselves from Shockworks, they don't need to change. They're really well suited to the car, and they'll work well with the Aerodynamics upgrades as well. But I think that's about it. It's not heaps of work, but I do plan to chill out and take my time with it. It's also quite expensive, buying a supercharger kit and all these other bits, gearbox rebuilds that go with it. Wheels won't change. I'll just change those over to run the AO50s rather than the slicks. Yeah, and visually, car's going to stay looking the same. I quite like the black. I like the black on the white. No need for stickers or anything like that. I'm pretty happy with the car as it is. So that'll take most of 2026 to get through. Don't know how much of that I'll be able to document. Probably once I'm reassembling the car back in the garage or doing some of the engine work, I'll try and video some of that. But yeah, while it's away getting fabrication, there's obviously no chance to video that, and everything else is just basic mechanical work. So that's the plans for 2026. I'm looking forward to having a bit more chill year. Like I said before, I'll actually be racing the Mazda 2. So for those that haven't seen this before, it's pretty much a dead stock Mazda 2 that I bought crashed from the auctions and just did some basic repairs on it. It has coilovers, it has brake pads, it has a race seat, and it will get a half cage before I go racing, and just a bit of weight reduction, just strip the interior, things like that. And that's it, and it's so much fun to drive. The only thing better than driving a fast car fast is driving a slow car fast. So I'll be competing in the under 1.6 litre class in the WA Speed Event Series for 2026 against my friends, so Blake and the Honda Jazz. Similar sort of setup to this, really good, fun, reliable car. My friend Braden, he will be racing a Corolla GTI, so a 4AGE powered front-wheel drive Corolla. And we'll also be racing against a bunch of Hyundai Excels, which is quite a popular race class here in Australia. So there's quite a few of those that compete in the Speed Series as well. All the cars are about 100 horsepower. I haven't touched the motor, and I won't do anything to the engine in this. All the cars weigh about the same. This is probably 900, 920 without driver, so about 1,000 kg with driver. Same as the XLs, same as the Jazz. So going to be super evenly matched. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to just doing a boatload of laps on the test days. Tyres are cheap, it doesn't wear through brakes, it doesn't use any fuel. I can run it on 91 octane if I want to. It's a great little car just to go and thrash around and have a lot of fun in. I do have a bit of work to do to this car, just some more weight reduction and things like corner weighting and suspension setup. I will try and video those. I think it'll be interesting to see how the corner weighting process works, and also redo my sort of instructional video on how to set up coilovers properly to make sure your bump and droop travels are correct, and you're not adjusting things the wrong way like all the manufacturers tell you to. So that's it. Pretty boring video. Only action is the laps that I've put in throughout the video of my fastest laps through the year, and just lots of me talking. I like to think about things and plan things, so this is an extension of that. But yeah, 2026, looking forward to a more chill year, looking forward to making this a heap faster, and hopefully looking for some cool events over in the eastern states to go to and compete in 2027. Honda Nationals will definitely be one of those, but I'll have to think about some other ones. There's some pretty cool events like World Time Attack, which would be great fun too. Thanks for watching. See you next time.